All right, thanks everyone for joining. It is noon on the dot, and today is part two of our cold climate fruit webinar series. Today we'll be covering NEWA fire blight and apple scab model updates with Dr. Kerik Cox from Cornell University. So this is, like I said, part two of our webinar series. You can go ahead and scan that QR code or go to fruit.wisc.edu/webinars/apples to register for the remaining two webinars. Our next one will be in March and our final one will be in April. So like I said, today we'll be hearing from Dr. Kerik Cox on NEWA fire blight and apple scab updates. Dr. Cox is a professor of plant pathology at Cornell University. He is also the program lead of Cornell Agritech section of plant pathology and plant microbiology. Our next webinar will be on Friday, March 13th, same time, noon to 1 p.m. Central Time. And that will also be featuring Dr. Kerik Cox, who will be covering organic fire blight and apple scab management. Couple things here at the very end, some upcoming events. We have our Emerging Berry Crops Winter Webinar Series. You can go ahead and scan that QR code. The first two have come and gone, but there are still two remaining if you're interested in elderberries and currants, and a final webinar featuring a farmer panel. And finally, we have a pruning workshop series coming up the end of February and through mid-March. If you'd like to register for any of those, you can go ahead and scan that QR code or go to go.wisc.edu/making the cut. And I will send all of this information out with a follow-up email as well. So before we begin, just a reminder to please use the Q&A chat to ask questions. That's the little question mark with the Q&A under it on your bottom panel. The follow-up email will include responses to any unanswered questions, links to resources, and the webinar recording, which is a YouTube link. And then at the very end of the series, I'll also be sending out a webinar series evaluation link so you can evaluate any of the webinars that you attended this year. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Leslie Holland, who will introduce Kerik.
Great. Thank you, Josie. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kerik Cox from Cornell University joining us today. He manages a program of tree fruit and berry research, extension, teaching, and administration at Cornell, so quite busy. So we really appreciate your time and expertise today, Kerik. Principal research efforts include applied disease management for apples and small fruit with a focus on alternative management practices, germicidal light, biopesticides, planting systems, covered environmental agriculture, disease forecasting, and organic solutions. A considerable portion of his efforts are concerned with practical or field antimicrobial resistance to agricultural fungicides and antibiotics, and extension efforts have focused on biopesticide education, antimicrobial resistance, disease forecasting, and applied disease management, with a strong emphasis on apples and controlled environmental production and small fruit. Kerik also does a significant amount of teaching at Cornell, including undergraduate and graduate courses in plant pathology and IPM courses as well. Kerik, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a highly anticipated discussion, and we're excited to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Though I've structured this thing. Josie, are they going to get in trouble if they post in the chat?
No, they won't get in trouble, but it's just
Okay.
easier for us to keep
Okay,
track of
gotcha. What I
questions.
plan to do with this thing is I'm going to talk about NEWA, and then I want to let them, since we have a full hour, right? If we don't have a full hour, shake your head no.
We do, yeah.
Because then we were going to go through some specific examples that present interesting scenarios, and so if the people like, I will build in a little bit of extra time as we do them so that they can attempt to do them live and like, why didn't I get this? This didn't happen. I've got the Q&A thing open and I've got the chat as well. So if you want to use the Q&A, we can do there. If I pose a question and they tell me the green tip date, etc. Or if they're very shy, they don't have to do it. It's fine. We can go from that route either. All right, but I'm going to go ahead and get started, and we'll walk through it. And if I see crickets or hear them, then I'll slowly move on. All right, let's do this, and let's see what we get. I'm going to start sharing right now. And you'll notice from the share, this is the one. Oh, that's the one. Yeah. Okay, good. This is the one we're seeing. Hopefully you're seeing an out of sync PowerPoint and the NEWA website, because I plan to go in and go back and forth a little bit in the talk. I'm going to move my picture to another monitor. And then, yeah, here we go. I'm going to do swap displays so that you can see it in full screen until we get to the part where we start messing around with NEWA. I'm going to make sure I get closer to the microphone as well, in case that's easy. That way I can monitor the chat and questions and anything we might have. And I do this. This is the same workshop that I use in teaching undergrads as well. It was made for growers, and they tend to have an easier time with it than the Cornell students, because they don't know what a farm is. All right. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to understand the concept of disease forecasting, how it's used. And then we're going to do apple scab, and we're going to use complete an exercise in the NEWA with the NEWA forecasting system. And we're going to go along. I will post things in the chat unless I get a stop from Josie that shows you the link. And that way you can easily access it through the Zoom and start to do the exercise yourself. I'll try to keep us going so that we finish clearly within an hour, but we see everything a little bit. And I want you to become familiar with fire blight, all its silly nuances, and for forecasting blossom blight, and we'll do an exercise with that as well. So what is the whole concept? It's the idea of using epidemiological information. Scientists like Leslie and I, we do a lot of studies to understand the biology and how disease occurs over space and time as related to environmental factors. We publish that in journals that are scientific, and then those get allowed us to continue to keep our jobs. But what we're doing now is taking all of those types of publications and actually turning them into tools that growers can use to predict the occurrence and risk of disease development. And it involves a lot of different factors: the host information, phenology, you know what that is. That's green tip bloom and petal fall and all that silliness. The pathogen presence, that's where Winnia or Venturia, the apple scab pathogen, is there. And it really heavily involves environmental conditions or the weather data. Unfortunately, it's still cold in Geneva and my radiator is running. Yes, we have radiators. It's not that advanced of a facility. And they're also working on the building. So if you hear jackhammering, that's can't be helped, unfortunately. Okay, so what we're doing is all these publications that have not been published in both mine and Leslie's times, but whoops, we're kicked out. Hold on, we're going back in. And that's what happens when you bump the keyboard with a very sensitive keystroke. So there are all these publications that we've done over the years on all these different diseases, and we have condensed them into simple web-based forecasting tools. They have to be simple because if they get too complex, they just become more frustrating and less informative. And it doesn't matter if it's New York, they're used for apples and many other crops worldwide. And one of the things they're going to do for you that we have come to just send in a couple of papers in plant disease, and our Cornell will be releasing a press article on it, is we're really finding that if you use forecasting, you really increase the cost effectiveness of the pesticide, whether it's an insect, whether it's disease. In the case of apple scab and fire blight particularly, you just get more bang for your buck, if you will, and you get better disease control. And then, of course, you're not wasting money, and then you're not running into situations where you're going to end up leading to fungicide and bactericide resistance. And then finally, the most important one, you don't lose plants due to disease. And like I mentioned before, they're big in apples and really big in specialty crops. And you might be like, why specialty crops more than others? Because as Leslie and I know, and we have to suffer through it, we have to spray more than once a season. Field and row crops just get one application, usually at a plant stage, and then then their season got a lot easier. But we're constantly going out and making sure these crops are safe, unfortunately. Okay, so now we're going to get into apple scab, and we'll talk about how and why the model works a little bit, and then we're going to do an exercise using some very interesting situations, stuff that you're going to encounter in the real world, and I want to be sure that you're prepared to answer the questions for yourself when these come up. Okay, what do we know on apple scab? This is what it looks like on my orchards. Well, this is what my orchards will look like in March and April. Right now, it's all snow, but let's just fast forward a little bit to early April or mid-April. I don't want to get too excited and think the snow's going away. and there's leaf litter on the ground. And inside that leaf litter are apple scab overwintering in the form of these disgusting pseudothecia. And these nonsense things here you see, these are the ascospores that scientists are always talking about. These are going to blast off into the trees from the leaf litter and cause the first infections. Then, if you get early infections, and you might not be able to see them all, and when we get into the weeds of these models, I'm going to tell you to keep spraying to make sure that nothing like this is on a leaf and gets to your fruit. Once you get these secondary infections from a different spore entirely, they will ruin your crop, effectively making it unfit for anything but cider production. What we've noticed is that most of what is happening on a farm site is local. These ascospores don't go far. As a matter of fact, most of them go from the orchard floor directly up into the one tree. And everything that you're doing is site specific. So if you abuse a material, you might lose it to resistance on your farm, but if your neighbor's doing it more effectively, it'll be fine. And then sadly enough, almost everything that people want to buy and eat gets scab. Apple scab, yeah, I mean, that's just the bottom line. All the stuff that's apple scab resistant doesn't taste very good, with the exception of the infamous Honey Crisp. And that's got other problems. And you'll still be monitoring that for fire blight as well. So you don't ever escape all diseases. And unfortunately, this is kind of what it will look like later on if it gets really out of control, particularly on Macintosh or something else. And you're looking at about 10 applications. So might as well plan them correctly. So these are the different types of things that one might do for apple scab in general. We're going to come in and you're going to whap that thing in the fall or spring with a urea application to the orchard floor. And you might ask, when do I do fall or spring? It's the time that you can drive the tractor in the orchard. I can't drive a tractor in the orchard right now, and I suspect you won't be able to drive one either. So sometimes people will do it in the fall if it has been 90 degrees in October, as it was in Geneva. The next thing you want to do is you want to jump in with your copper. Bang. You're going to want to put this on. This is just knocking down your overwintering inoculum. And as soon as green tip happens, that's when you're going to do most of your fungicide program. Actually, what we do at Geneva is I do 2 coppers, and I don't ever find any injury. And then we move on to our nice single-site fungicides and other multi-site protections from bloom to about 2nd cover. Now in Geneva, we're kind of pushing it up to about 4th because we're finding strange weather and makes seasons extended. So what does the forecasting do? Those silly ascospores, those things deep in the leaves, this is a late season, this will turn into a structure that makes ascospores over the winter. And these will mature. It's going to say how many of them are mature and when they release, and also tell you when infection is happening. And it will help you track these primary infections. What about those other infections I missed earlier? No model implicitly predicts these, but what I found is that this fungus shares the same water and temperature requirements as the first part of the fungus. The ascospores are very similar to Canidia in terms of what they can do. And if you still are applying using the same principles that for these predictions later on, you do a pretty darn good job. And then we use the NEWA system for New York, and I believe you have access to it as well. And this is what we have for the NEWA apple scab system. All right, this is the link. Do this real quick, just for our future note once we get back into it. All right, so what do we got? There's the link right there. I'm going to paste this in the chat. All right. All right, no complaints yet. Okay, it's there. You can begin to click on it and take a peek, but we'll go into it and I'll do everything very slowly and together so you can kind of play with it. It's going to tell you, are the ascospores mature? Are they ejecting? When they're predicted to eject? And when might an infection event come? These are the types of things you want to know. What do we got on the chart? Date, maps. I usually recommend opening all of these little tiny side things because you might want to see them, and then you can begin to search. And I'm going to show you all that very easily. You see the maturity, the daily discharge, and the cumulative discharge. These 2 first days are always what's happening yesterday and today, and all the other 5 or 6, or well, there's a lot now, are future forecasts. So that's how to deal with that. And it'll show you how is the maturity developing over the season. If we're in the middle of the season, you won't see a completed graph. If we're at the beginning, it'll just be like that far. Same with the other weather summaries as well. And that's just mostly for your edification. I still get anxious about apple scab being present in orchards, a couple of days after these things say they're done. They're only equations, and they can't take into account the erratic weather changes that we sometimes see in our modern era. And so I'm usually telling growers to stay vigilant till about 14 to 21 days after petal fall, particularly if we're running into a lot of late season rains. And then it'll show you the fun infection summary. Look at all those different days. This is a great week for apple scab. And this is the week I'd tell a girl, yeah, you want to try a biological? This is your time to do it. You will do organic farming quite well in this situation. It tells you there's an infection event. Nope. The temperature, very cold for apple scab. Leaf wetness, how many hours? Look, you're going to get a break on the 18th. This is telling you that's the day to spray if you really wanted to. Normally, I wouldn't advise it. I would advise waiting a bit. Hours of greater than 90% relative humidity and the rain amount. But, I was like, no infection, but wow, there's a big chunk of rain coming. But not a lot of leaf wetness hours. This must be a very interesting situation. It's 57. Maybe it's going to dry up very quickly or there's a lot of wind. So we watch those type of days. And it will give you a warning, and then it will either use the local data, and I do recommend buying your own weather station for your farm and getting it on the network, but you can still use the ones for the local area. They work pretty well. They work just as well as the wetness predictions that we get on our phone. Okay. What are we going to do? Some extra considerations for the apple scab model before we dive into this mess. All right. It does predict primary apple scab and ascospore dynamics. I still use it to give me an idea about the conidia or secondary apple scab. That's from spores that occur later. It gives you cursory information on maturity and ejection. There are other models that give you more complicated information. I don't find the extra information or the extra precision to be that valuable, considering how much noise is in the environment and variability between what a computer is calculating and what's the real world. And then it tries to use forecast data very conservatively. 1 to 2 days out, it gives a little more weight than water predictions 3 to 5 days out. Something very important to know. Okay, what are we going to do? They're going to predict many favorable or many infection periods. And what I advise to growers, and we're going to show you some advice very specifically, is don't apply every time. Apply at the highest risk periods. Not every infection. As we're looking at these examples, you're going to see big periods, and I'm going to say, maybe not now, but to wait a little bit and use your residual to clean up during the easy periods. And always, spraying in advance, use common sense. If for some reason the model doesn't seem to be agreeing with your perception of reality as you walk out the front door, common sense is your best guide. Remember, computers are just running math. They do not have common sense. Despite what ChatGPT and the other AI things will tell you, you can get into trouble with those. Yeah, look at there's 100 of those boogers. Yes. Oh, you could, but you might not see the same exercise. Yeah. Okay, so always, if you can, try to avoid spraying after an infection period. If you let a bunch of inoculum build up, then apply a fungicide. Oh, finally, the heater turned off. Then it will be this huge population from which 1 or 2 individuals could survive that were resistant and then move on. Sometimes you can't help it. And I might even recommend spraying in the middle. Boop. Okay, we're going to do an example together. And then we're going to try to discuss it live more or less. You can post things in the chat, or I'll just keep running my mouth as we move through them. So we're going to do one together. And let's see, what do we got? I'm going to mook this screen a little bit double shared here so that we can begin to go to things. And I've tried to open up the NEWA thing. You have the NEWA in there. And if you're not here, for my purposes, I don't ever sign in. But if you were a grower, you would sign in and make a list of stations of interest. If you already have an account and are signing in, it may be more challenging for you to pick one of the stations that I'm using, because I don't want to go to your default dashboard. So I always leave mine unsigned. For specific examples, we're going to show one. You go to IPM crop formats. If you go to the page home, it'll be here, IPM crop formats. And the link that I've posted in the chat is the apple scab one. I'm going to click on it. And we are going to do some historical examples because they're very exciting. And you're going to see today that it's automatically going to pop up with a bunch of things on the left side. February 2026. We know there's no apple scab going now. It says approximately 98-degree days BFE from green tip. Yeah, I guess so. That's a lot of days. Never mind. It just seems quite cold. And it's got your date. It's got the selection map. The first thing I'm going to do is start turning on all the other stuff. It can't turn on many of the other little panels at this point because, whoa, it really jumped. I got a really testy scroll wheel. We're going to have to go back up before we get the fire blight. Oh gosh. Let's do this. Get back to it. Yeah, here's where we are. All right, very good. So the one thing I wanted to show you different things. We're going to do a station in the Hudson Valley called Campbell Hall. And you can type this in if you aren't signed in. And I'm going to simply, first thing I'm going to do is going to try to find the station. You click over here, and if anyone needs to see it more zoomed in, let me know, because this is one of these silly high-res monitors. I'm going to try to zoom in a little more on my browser so that you can see a little bit more. And I might zoom in just a smidge more on this guy so that we can kind of see these numbers. So I don't want to be in Geneva, and it's going to default to, who knows, maybe your location. But I'm going to type in Campbell Hall. Camp. Oh, there it is. You start typing, and it will auto-fill. So if you know the name of your site, you can begin to type yours as well. But I'm going to select this one. And I told myself that I want to pick a date. You can go through this system afterwards and see what happened in 2025, but I want to go to 2020 right there. Oh, it's the last year I can show these examples. Dark. Okay, so I don't want February 2020. I want April 25th. So I am going to try to get there by clicking on these little arrows. And then once you get to a location, my recommendation is not only clicking, but clicking with feeling. And that means like, I'm just going to click it a couple times. If it's working, what you will end up seeing, I'm going to go back. Don't do what I'm doing now. It usually will show a little tiny spinning wheel. And if you see that, that means it's thinking. But we're going to go ahead and look and see what it says. The first thing I want everyone to take note of is the green tip date. All right. Scroll down here. The green tip date for the Hudson Valley will be alarming to me, and it will definitely be alarming to you as Wisconsin growers. 3/11, that's terrifying. If you really want to scare yourself into an early season start, open up a site in North Carolina. That's quite shocking. They'll be like, what? Green tips today? That's crazy. No wonder they get wrecked by all of the diseases in the South for apples. I wouldn't grow apples there. But anyway, we're going to 2025. It says 320, and if you're seeing all of this, you're seeing the right thing. You can kind of see it. It's focused in on the region. There's Campbell Hall Crisp right there in the little selection map. You can zoom out and see like, oh my gosh, there's New York City and Long Island. Crazy. Yeah, there's really people growing apples that close to it. There are a lot of people growing apples on Long Island, as you've noticed. And all of these growers, these little leaves, are weather stations. And it sounds like you got 100 to choose from there. That's a good many. And the more we have, the better the network gets. And yeah, and so the next phase we're going to see, okay, dates of any predicted infection periods. What I've done here, look at all of these other weird things. Got daily weather summaries, maturity graph. If you click these to the right and left, they will show up at some point in the scroll of the NEWA. There's your maturity graph. Well, it's telling you things are getting moving. I'm going to go ahead and open them all up. And one of the things I do not like is they don't occur in the order in which I find it the most convenient. I can't rearrange the order in which they show up on the thing, and that's very disappointing. However, as a grower and a collaborator, oh, well, we're really zoomed out now, in another state, you carry a lot more weight with a complaint than I would. Be like, you know what I'd like to see? I want to see the infection period stuff up first. Or I at least want it right next to the maturity summary, and then they'll take you seriously. They look at me and they're just like, he doesn't know what the growers want. But here's the infection summary way down here. And they'll say, like, why don't you just hide all of this? It's like, well, I want to see it all. I want the most important information up front. So what we're looking at for April 25th in the Hudson Valley is there are 2 infection periods. You can see them. And what are we asking for? Dates of the predicted infection periods. There are 2 of them. So April 25th. 24th through the 25th is 1. Combined one, it never stops raining for more than 12 hours. That's what the combined means. If you see that, there's no big break in the rain. If you get a big break of 12 hours predicted, it will split them into 2. Obviously, we have a lot of dry weather here, and they don't continue at that particular point. So we do have some interrupted wetness. It's about half an inch of rain, but over these 3 days, even the 26th, you're looking at almost a full inch of rain. But what's scary about it is that you can see into the future on April 29th, there's another big blob coming up with a big infection period. You can't even see where it goes all the way. To see where it goes, you just simply click to the 26th. But we're not going to do that for right now. I'm going to try to move you along. What's the largest ascospore discharge and cumulative discharge for the week? I always like to look at these. I got to scroll way back up to the tippity top. Well, cumulative discharge, we're at 75% maturity, deep in the heart of the ascospore season, if you will. And we got about 6 for the first one, 5, 2, and then 9% discharge. Just not a lot of discharge overall. Even for the week, you're looking at about 11 plus 9, about 20%. Well, 20% is a bit. You're going to want to spray something in this particular time. And then cumulative for the week, we're already blown through most of our ascospores already. 80% have already shot off into the space over the course of the season. And how much rain are we getting this week? I already went through it briefly before. Half an inch, almost 3/4 of an inch. So a big chunk of rain. And you might be going to this week thinking like, what on earth do I do? So those are the different key pieces that we need. All right, now what's the next slide ask us today? Okay, we're going to take a look at this one. All right, we're in the same place. We're not changing anything. Maybe I'll move it over a little bit so you guys can see it a little bit better. And we're going to have a scenario. I'm going to talk us through it. And if you're willing to disagree, you can disagree in the question section. Or what do you want to do? There's a friend. We'll say it's not you. It's a friend who doesn't know what they're doing. They applied a fungicide on 423 and want to know what they should do again about applying again on 430/20. What do you tell them and why? They put one on here, and this is where it gets a sticky situation. You got one on, great. You're ready to deal with this inch of rain, but look, you got one more coming. And in the future, this is in historical mode. If this was in future mode, you couldn't go past April 30th. You'd be like, what do you do and why? And what do you tell them in this particular instance? And then that's the inherent quandary. You don't have to answer it, but this is what you're thinking about. The first thing you're probably going to do is like, I just call Leslie and ask her, what do I do? That's one option. Or you can be like, well, I know my own orchard. I got this. What would I do? I would be very scared. I think I would probably apply again. And if I was going to do it, I would wait the longest here in case this is a bigger event with more rain in the future. If you went back, you put one on there and you're like, oh, I'm going to really lose a lot of money, but here we go. I'm going to put something on there and try to weather that extra inch of rain because below it, there could be another one. All right. Very exciting. What do we got next? All right. So that was the first scenario. Now we're going to go back in 2019. And you can go back in... Oh, wait. I don't think we can go back in 2019. I think they took 2019 away. Nope, it's there. Thank goodness. For luck. All right, I'm going to the same place. I'm going to 2019. And the idea is this is going to show you different time periods. Okay, green tip date. And you're more than welcome to click along. So the green tip date for 2019 on the 25th, same year. I mean, no, different year, same time. And I'm going to click again with feeling because I don't feel like it did anything. That's the spinning thing you need to see right there. That spinning thing. That tells you it refreshed. So if it ever acts weird, you don't see that spinning hash mark, that means it's still showing you the old garbage. Yes, and now we see that the green tip date has changed to April 3rd, right? I guess that's April. Yeah, April 3rd. And then now we're looking at a different time. This is a different year. And this year, the season started much later. It was almost a month earlier in 2020. Now we're in 2019, and it started much later. All right. And then I always want to know about the infection periods. Like, look at all this maturity. Oh, it's terrifying. And there's yellow and red. What does all that mean? Let's go take a peek down at the infection periods. This is a really dark week, as you can see. If you had to do them, you can sort of follow along. You can start to see these things. And the dates are the 23rd and 24th, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th. And you can tell this is going to make for a really awful scenario right here. Yeah, okay. What's we talk about? While we're here, we're just going to look at the rain. This is allow you to see the things. You could see why I made that comment. Well, I would love this chart to be closer to the maturity chart. And you might be loving that. We got an inch of rain coming. We've got an infection period, but not a lot of rain on the 23rd, the 24th. But what it seems like the really big one coming that will never end, there is a gap. It's a short gap here on the 28th. This is where all the rain is coming for this one. Let's go back up and look at the maturity. Okay, this is dark. We see what is our weekly discharge? 11 on the 23rd, and the 26 is blasting out 23% of whatever's left. And these numbers will not add up. They're 23% of the mature ascospores currently. So don't think that like, oh, we should be done. No, it's a percent of a percent. So don't get too excited or don't get frustrated when like, why am I not done yet? So this percent of a percent is a really big period, and it's coming there and there. So you have 2011, it's about 34%. This is a big chunk of what's mature is going off. I mean, the first part, you'll probably see the maturity a lot lower there, and then it pumps up to 48, this part, and then it adds on to that. And then you're getting pretty terrified at what this says. So ask maturity for the first infection event. Well, it's 48, and then the largest daily discharge is 23%, and the cumulative is somewhere, if you add all this up, it's going to be about 35%. It's absolutely dark. And we know there's an inch of rain coming down here. And in this particular instance, what are we going to see from it? The query is someone applied a fungicide on the 22nd. They're catching this one and wants to know what they should do on 4/27. Yeah, what do you tell them? Like in this particular instance, you see all the discharge. The 19th is not that long ago. I think the first question I would ask, and you're more than welcome to ask me what I do, but I mean, I'm going to tell you anyway. So I think if this was something like Captan Mancozeb, I would probably weather it, and then on the 19th, I don't know, it might be tempting to recharge. Let's take a look at the infection periods again. If you're really scared or you had something like Macintosh, I think I'd go back in on the 25th. If it's the 27th, they're like, oh, you kind of missed it. But look, something else is coming up. You could weather it if your pressure was low and you have a low scab orchard with the 19th spray. Skip this one and then come back in and hit it with some of your best materials that you got. I probably would say a single site material. And you're like, wait, aren't you spraying after the infection event? Yeah, a little bit. We're kind of kicking back and protecting forward, but we already have a protection on in the beginning. And so this is how we sort of walk through these various scenarios. We're going to see if we're about ready to switch gears to Fire Blight. So what I'll do, if it's cool there, when we can open the floor and people could pop in a couple questions if you have anything about Scab yet in this example.
Yeah, and feel free to throw your questions in the Q&A.
Yep.
That way I can keep track and
that way if you
we
tried
can
to do
see.
something and it's saying something weird, we can watch. And if you don't got none, that's great too. I love it. I'm going to slowly migrate the PowerPoint part to the Fire Blight. I'm not seeing too much, but we'll wait a minute. I'll drink some water. Yep. If we get a lot of time, someone can try to mess around on their own place and ask me a question of why it's saying what it is. But I think I'm going to show you every frustrating scenario that you can encounter with the different models. Okay. Let's go back into Fire Blight then. Okay. All right, here we go. We're going to look at the Fire Blight model, Blossom Blight forecasting, and we're going to do some exercises. Oh, thanks for posting the link in. That is awesome. Okay, what are we working with this time? Blossom Blight is where it all begins. And you get these primary moisture causes spores to propagate. When do you, so you spray, you want to spray, great question, Patricia. We want to spray before the rain. That way, particularly if you're using something like Captan and Mancozeb, because, yes, it will put down a protective layer of material, and when the spores try to germinate, they will die. If you have active spores that are sporulating on lesions in your orchard, you still want to spray and hit them before the rain, but you want to do something that burns out. If you're organic, I recommend something like Oxidate will burn out a sporulation lesion. You can use a QOI fungicide to burn out a lesion, but what you end up doing is you have a large population of spores and you're applying a fungicide to which there could get resistance. And so when I burn out, I kind of tend to like to use one of the organic products like Oxidate because it is sort of a toxic things you spray time you spray to the vents. Yes, that's what I would do. If I was going for the vents, I go for the biggest ones and try to get it on before the biggest blob of rain. So in that one case, you could, that we just showed, you could put it on before the rain. It's still showing, yeah. In this case, if you want, yeah, the big rain's coming, and if you had a weak material or use something weak sauce on the 19th, you'd want to jump in on that 25th and smoke it as quickly as you can to deal with all of this nonsense that's coming up. And as you get to the end of that period, you would do it. You want to use these breaks to get the material on so that the protection, the layer of the fungicide is there. Can you put the name of the products in the chat? Captan and Mancozeb? Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, these are the generics. You probably, Captan, Mancozeb. And these might not last forever. Oxidate is my burnout material because it's not going to lead to a lot of resistance. It's not going to give you any residual whatsoever, but it's very concentrated. It burns, and you don't get it on yourself. You'll feel the pain. Yes, requested add the spray dates. Used in the rain. Help determine the wash up. Yeah, that's a good one. You're just going to have to use the general rule of about an inch. You would probably need to recover. And Mancozeb can take 2 inches. Do we even know what washes off the other materials? No one has any clue because no one wants to fund that type of research. And that's really tricky, is knowing how long all of these products last. I usually use a general rule of about an inch. It's time to go back in and take it out. Or if it's going to be more than an inch coming, you need to recover and prepare. These two things this one sticks and this one spreads around. If you combine them together at the very lowest rates, you do a pretty good job. But the EPA will probably take them away. Yep. That would be good to be able to track the depletion. And that's been sort of a goal. And we have a couple of grants that we're working on to do this type of stuff where you could kind of see the depletion. So you're not just guessing at an inch. But yeah, they don't last for very long. And as you move to the biologicals, they're going to last. Does copper sulfate work? Yeah, that will last a while, but you might injure your fruit finish if you use it later in the season. So be very careful with copper. And particularly you can use it for fire blight that we're talking about now. Yep. So primary infections, bam. These will happen here. It will multiply on the sugary surface of the stigma, wash into the floral cup of the rain, and then lead to this thing, which will end up wrecking the entire crop if this goes unchecked or this happens. So how do we beat blossom blight for fire blight? This is a bacterium now. We're not dealing with fungicides anymore. Don't even think about using those things. Usually antibiotics, but you can use biologicals as well. And I will give you some pointers on how to best use biological products for this type of system. What is a PGR? Plant growth regulator. Some of these things will happen, and defense inducers. But for blossom blight, you're mostly going to be using some antimicrobials. The shoot blight phases, you can use, we'll take out your bearing wood, we'll kill entire trees, particularly in high-density young plantings. And you're going to deal with this by pruning. If it's a young planting or the young tree, you'll probably pull the whole tree out, throw that in the bin as quickly as you can, and then replant, because that's definitely your most cost-effective and time to finish. And then you can beat this one by pruning, using defense inducers and PGRs. What do we want to say about the thing? This is sort of the diagram of how it happens. Where does the bacteria come from? It comes from oozing cankers. And then this is another reason. If you make that silver tip copper spray for apple scab, this will sometimes get these oozing cankers that happen at the beginning of the season. Can you see an oozing fire blight canker? They're really, really hard to spot, and they're on tiny bits of wood for the most part. Yep. Hard to spot. Once you see one, if your tree looks like it had fire blight last year and it's making syrup, that's when to be very concerned and make a copper application right at silver and green tip. These things will fly through the air when it gets to bloom, and they'll splash, infecting the flowers, kind of like we've seen. And then it gets inside and just constantly cycles. But where we're targeting the models is that primary infection. We got to stop it down. Once it gets in here, you can spray all the junk you want on the outside. It's not going to do very much. You need something that works on the inside. So these models really focus on this part. So they predict blossom blight infection periods. One key tip, if you ever want to know if you have blossom blight or natural thinning, if you come to a flower and it looks dead, I can't tell if it's naturally thinning or blossom blight. If you see an ooze droplet, like right there, you can definitely freak out. You think I have blossom blight. If you give this a gentle tug and it comes off in your hands, that's natural thinning. If it stays tight and it looks dead, you probably have some blossom blight and you need to take some action and get rid of it. And it will help you track shoot blight, but we're not going to really focus on that for today's exercise. And using this is the best time to avoid buildup of populations and antibiotic resistance if you're using strep or kasugamycin. And then we use heat units, and moisture is important only that it needs to exist, but it's not as important as it is for apple scab. This model will do much better for managing infections because it's really challenging to apply moisture. It's going to say, oh, it's snowing right now. And then you look outside, it won't snow, or it'll be like, there's no chance of snow. And the weather systems can't do a great job of predicting these. All right. So we got two different models in it. I'm not going to spend so much time doing this, but this beautiful drawing was by my friend Tiana DuPont out of Washington State, and she put together these slides, and I thought you would just kind of like to see how this works. So this is the colony-forming units of bacteria. This means individual members of the warriors that are going to destroy your flowers. And this is how many there are. It's pretty dark. And it shows you the peak temperature. So you can begin to think, do I need to know about curves and math? No, Leslie and I can worry about that for you. But what you need to know is like, well, once it gets to about 78 degrees, fire blight gets real scary. And that's what I want you to take away from this particular thing. Oh, there's the cute picture of her bacteria multiplying. Oh, multiplying. And then any water will wash them down into the bottom. I guess I don't show that animation. So the cougar blight model is an older one, and it's in the NEWA system. And we can actually, Washington State has allowed us to refer to it as cougar blight. Thanks to them. Very nice of them. And it used to take some of 4 days. And that was very frustrating in the old days. And they call it a temperature risk value. So if you ever see a TRV, that just means the 4-day sum of degree hours, which is our measure of heat in this particular instance. And when that gets high, as you can see down here, once it gets into the hundreds or near 1,000, we end up getting like exceptional levels of danger. And it tells you about wet flowers. You won't see this model. This is what theirs look like. Now it's more modern, and it's calculating these risk values on a daily basis. And what's really happening is in NEWA's case, it's calculating the daily risk value on an hourly basis. So as it goes throughout the day, oh, this is also doing it on an hourly basis. Never mind. Now everything calculates on an hourly basis so that if you were like obsessed with this stuff, you could just watch it tick up and hit the high risk period in the middle of a day. I don't recommend you do that. I just remember check it a couple days before and see what it's going to become, because forecasting temperature is pretty easy. And then this will tell you there's different selections. Like I've never had fire blight. It occurred in my area last year, and now it's active. We tend to tell growers to select this history. It's occurred in my area last year. Your area meaning your county. And I don't think there's too many counties in the eastern half of the United States where fire blight has never occurred. Maybe if you're even the potato growing regions of Long Island now have fire blight. So any free moisture can do the trick. We'll wash this bacteria into the floral cup. And once the bacteria get in there, they'll infect and blight this flower. Oh, look at that great animation. Look at them get washed in there. I love it. She's got a video now. It's even more exciting. Only pathologists get excited about animations and fire blights. That's okay. We can move on. And even a 1/10 of an inch of rain. In case you didn't know this, Washington State is a desert, and they get wrecked by fire blight every year. So even the humidity in their trees or dew coming off the grass can be enough when it's really bad to make flowers wet and get this bacteria in there. So as you're debating whether or not you have an infection period, be careful with that. And then the other one we like to use on the very East Coast, University of Maryland, is the Mary Blight model. And it essentially has the same thing. It's calculating degree hours. It's telling you how many flowers get colonized and what % bloom you are. And there's a computer program. If you have a Windows machine, it's very hard to find and download, and it takes a little bit of time to use. One thing I do want to call to your attention, since this impacts what you're going to see in NEWA and why, is this silly table. Now, the Cougar Blight model just said, oh, it's a big number, and it says, do you have water? Yes or no? And it will spit out a nasty risk value. The Mary Blight model has different requirements for infection. The first one being, the Cougar Blight always assumes you have flowers. So the first one has bloom. And if you have 1+, if you just have bloom, you get a plus. If the degree hour greater than 65 has hit a threshold, you'll get a second plus. And you can see it as moderate or high. If you have wet flowers, you'll also get a third plus. And the final one that really starts to throw the predictions into a loop is the average temperature for the day. Is it greater than 60 degrees? Now, why would we care about this? Sometimes it gets hot during the day and gets back down to freezing at night. And if that happens, you don't get all the pluses, you won't get an infection. So many instances, you can get wet flowers bloom and build up enough degree hours for a fire blight infection. But if you have a cold night, it will kick it back down to a risk factor that I don't think you should waste your money spending antibiotics on. And then sometimes you're going to say like, wait, it's got 1,000,000 degree hours and it's turned green and safe. That's because the average temperature dropped. And we'll see examples. Okay. What is the threshold for this one? It's 100, and it's called epiphytic infection potential. Now, Mary Blight people said that you can't use my name. It's a trademark. You can call it EIP, and you can use all the science you want from the model. So it's essentially the same. And we've worked with the creators to put this into Mary Blight. And before this webinar, we had a person from Ohio that was angry and upset, and they did not believe it was calculating the degree hours correctly. And we got to take a glimpse at the actual code and prove that it's still working, which is wonderful. Now, the other thing that's weird about this model is that flowers are only alive for 80 degree hour days, base 40. And so flowers are constantly falling off and coming on. So this prediction window, if you will, is just moving down the season, making it incredibly complex. All right, now that you're sick of this is what it looks like. Let's don't look at that. Let's go look at what we have in NEWA. We have the Cougar Blight risk forecast, the infection potential. Now you can wake up from the pillow, from sleeping through that complicated explanation, and you can even, with your eyes crossed, you can see, okay, red, that's going to be really bad. So we have 2 models in here. East Coast people tend to not like to use this one. They don't think it's complicated enough. And they tend to say this one's better because it's got more complicated levels. The sad part is the scientific studies have proven that both are equally good. What do I use? I look at both of them. And in looking at this graph, I think, I don't need to know what any of these numbers mean. I think I'd put something on before the 19th if I had some wetness, because this looks bad on both models. And that's kind of what I would like to impress upon the crowd today. And it's all stuck in the NEWA system. You got it, fully automated. There's the Fire Blight page. It's already been posted for your enjoyment. The cool thing about Cougar Blight is it allows us to select a different history, and we'll see that. I just recommend keeping the default. What's neat about it is over the course of the season, it will push out a picture of your Cougar Blight risk levels. And it's all been fully updated with the new system. I worked with Tiana, and everyone's happy, and it gets you a good picture of what your Fire Blight season looks like. We don't get the risk for the Mary Blight, but you can come back and look at your last season and think, well, yeah, that makes sense. It was really nasty there. I should have put something on at that point. But for the most part, we're going to focus on pretending that we're into the future. We're in an actual season. So here's some of our thresholds. And once the EIP gets above 70, and you satisfy the other characteristics and get that big red on the Mary Blight, we recommend using a streptomycin or kasugamycin. If your EIP is low and you haven't put anything on in a while, and you got a lot of flowers and susceptible varieties, that's where your oxytetracycline or biological can come into play. And in that particular instance, the oxytetracycline is not very good. Biologicals sometimes work just as well or better. And these products come in a variety of different names. The kasugamycin will be Kasumin, and it just looks like Kasu, M-I-N. And streptomycin comes in a variety of different ones. And use the one you like the most, or don't, and use only biologicals. But that's another talk. So they tell you how when the infections are favorable. Always use common sense. It won't guarantee you failure or future disease. I've had so many growers come back and say, oh, the model said I had an infection. I sprayed for it and I didn't get disease. I'm like, that's exactly what you wanted. You wanted to be warned, spray for it and didn't get disease. Why are you angry that you didn't get fire blight? I don't know. So there you have it. It can't tell you anything about shoot blight because that's all about internal movement or external injury. If it hails outside, just listen to what Leslie says for an extension alert and protect the damage to the tissue. You don't need to use models for that point. And shoot blight, there are different options to do, and we'll talk about them later. And the bottom line is you're going to get better control if you use these models for blossom blight. Everyone in New York is using them now, and they're living by them, and they're going to help you best guide the application. All right, we're going to do it. Here we go. Let's take a look at some of these examples. I'm going to go to the first one. All right, and these will illustrate some of the really frustrating, silly parts. Like, oh, you're always picking Hudson Valley. Well, I don't know. It's a hot area of the state, and they get blamed. We're going to go to, if you want to follow along, we're going to pick Campbell Hall Crisp. We're still in it. If you used that station before, you'll still see that we're there. And I'm going to go to May 2020. Thank goodness we can still look at 2020. And I'm not going to be in April because New York blooms in May. You might be June. I don't know. That's how cold it is for how long. Or it could be very similar as we all get compressed. And I want to see that spinning hashtag that went just for a minute. It's gone now. It's fine. And we'll make sure it works. We'll be looking at different things. It's going to tell me green tip was the same date it was the last time I did it. I'm not in Fire Blight. If you're like me and not in Fire Blight, you check the link in the thing or simply find it, IPM crop forecasts, back to Apple, Fire Blight. For those who asked that question about depletion, there is a depletion component in the FlySpec Sooty Blotch model on that last page. But I don't want to get in there. May 2020. Are we here? Finally. You can pick the different histories. I just recommend the middle one. And it only affects the Cougar Blight prediction. Blossoms opened in April. That seems very early for me. That causes me stress just seeing that date. This would allow you to put a streptomycin spray on and zero out the model. It'd be cool if we could do that for the apple scab one. I think someone recommended that. Yep. Send a complainant email to the NEWA coordinator, and maybe some of that I'll be like, yeah, that person's absolutely right. Let's put it in, Dan. And then he'll do it. He's a pretty good guy. I mean, he's made changes. He's done some stuff. And it's getting better with every year. Okay, you can put a date in. What are we looking at? First bloom, we already saw that, 4.8. What's the next thing? Highest Cougar Blight. They're called 4-day DH accumulations, but they're really now just I need to change my PowerPoint. The model got updated before my exercise. Look at that. Now it's daily. Let's just look at the largest daily one. It's looking nasty at about 373. What is the infection potential, EIP? That's the Mary Blight. Don't say the word too loud. You might get sued. So we just call it infection potential value. It's about 128. What's the worst days? I would say we're looking at the 16th through the 19th. And then what's the latest day that a grower should spray? I'm like, wait, we need to know about moisture. Where does the moisture live? Okay, I'm going to go down here. I'm going to hit weather summary. You can see the graph. I'm going to turn it off because just make me scroll for longer. And then here, oh, we can finally see the weather summary. All right, when is it nasty? It starts to get nasty on the 16th, and we got red. And then the 17th there, oh, it's a pretty bad week. I think if I were a grower and I'm seeing the first red there, get something on before wetness in the rain hours on May 15th. It's not really that tricky. And I think you can weather this down there. So here's one of those weird situations where things are high and the average temperature might have dropped on this day. And that's why it went from like red to very low. And we're going to take a peek. What's it say about the 19th? Yeah, look at that, 58. So the average temperature drops below that threshold. And you see where it zeroed out a lot of the warning associated with the EIP model. So the average temperature is important. If you get a cold night, it will stop that fire blight from doing stuff. Okay, that's cute. What else do we got? What do we say? Do we have a question? A scenario right there. All right, so 20, 16th. Growers said if they should apply or the 17th. And a livelihood. And you can begin to think about what you would do. As you can see, when I answered this question, it's like, man, out there the morning of the 15th before this happens. And then I would watch my actual local predictions and see the little radar and think I got a spray, or have an Evercrest or Gala or something like that. I'd probably go out the night before and put it on because my crop is important. Because this is a lot of infection, there's a lot of rain, and we have a lot of nasty infections that week. Okay. I'm going to click a little bit ahead. Now we're going to go look at the next exercise. All right. First, wait, is this 2? Did I do the right thing? Did I 20? And then I not update it. What am I doing now? Oh, we went to Peru. That's right. For the first blossom date. All right. That's an excellent question. Let's go ahead and answer that question. If you disagree with the first blossom date, and that's a good question, Deidre, you should change it to whatever it is for your block. And if it's no blossoms, then you can ignore the but you're more likely to have more than one variety on there. So what I would do is, if this disagrees and you have an earlier cultivar, put that early blossom date in there. If it's April 31st, you drop that in there. If nothing is going, then you can chill. But if one thing is open, leave it open. Now, the other thing you're going to want to do is you get to the end of the season, and it's going to try to tell you your flowers have fallen off the tree because it hit that weird threshold window. If this happens and you still have flowers on the tree, just make the first blossom date a few days before the current date, and the predictions will come back. I think we're going to see an example of this. That's a great question. Always, you can adjust it, but if it's fine and it's open, you can leave it the way it is. It's just telling you that all this does is say, hey, please keep running the model for me because I have open flowers. When you have young plantings or new plantings, you're going to be moving this blossom date into the future, and you're going to see that it gets really scary in the summer, obviously. All right, I'm going to go to Peru in the same year and time. I'm going to pick a different station. Boop. I'm going to type in Peru. Peru. What was that saying? We just wanted to... Gross. That's disgusting. I don't need that. All right, I'm going to do Peru Northern Orchard. What the heck? Do I tell anyone? No, I just said Peru. Is there a basic Peru? Peru is in the really north part of, and you're going to see this. You're going to watch the predictions just go away. And you might ask yourself, look, I see the spinning hashtag. What's happening? It says the blossom is open today. And we'll get right at your question. Well, there's no results. Do I even need to worry about it? Nothing's happened. It says it's opening on the 20th. But let's pretend that you disagreed with them. It's like, no, I got flowers on some cultivars. Come back up here and drop that first blossom bait just a couple days before. And now, what does it tell me? Okay, it's still safe. All right, it's still pretty cold. That's not too shocking. What this thing also here is telling you that it hasn't had 4 days of heat. That's fine, but it's still counting daily levels. That's what that little asterisk says. And it's pretty safe. So I'm feeling great about this. What else we got on this silly thing? The highest cougar blight daily, about 245. You can tell it's going to get really hot at the end of the week, and that's why we jacked that blossom date up. Latest date the grower should spray. I'd look at this and I would say, don't waste your antibiotics yet. I would say, watch a little bit and see how we're going. Do we have a lot of water going into the 21st? Let's find out. Nope, dry as a bone. We don't even have the word yes for dew. Well, why is it slower moderate? Okay, that's a great question. Now why is this moderate risk when it's like a flipping 2? Let's go back. That means for that Mary Blight, which I think it's confusing, that a bunch of these other pluses are there. So everything else is there. We have an average temperature above 60. We have wetness and we have bloom. That gets you 3 pluses, and that will kick things towards the yellow. But we don't have the degree date hour requirement for Mary Blight, so it's going to kick it back from not a really heavy infection. So it's probably missing that. Let's see if it's even missing the average temperature button. Yeah, the average temperature is not 65, but what it must have is it's got some wetness and flowers, and that'll move it to yellow. And if it had wetness, flowers, and one of the others, it'll move it to orange. And so that's what happened. Yeah. Some of these other days where it's all green, there's probably not any wetness that day. Good question. This is why we're doing these silly examples. All right, let's go back to our current and final example. Example 2. Okay. And what's the available moisture for the peak period? It's dry as a bone. I'd leave it alone. And we are starting to get into temperatures where the average gets high enough to be a little bit concerning. So what's our question? All right. Now, a friend wants to know in this case, we're looking on this week. They called you today, and they're like, hey, it's the 16th. Now, Leslie, should I spray on the 22nd? Like, oh, I don't know. I guess very scary. If you don't know, you could just recommend a biological, or I would tell them to probably wait a day or two and see what's happening. Now, we can answer this scenario by creeping a day ahead or two. Let's just say now we say, hey, call me back on Monday because this is the Saturday. I hate Saturday calls. And I'm looking here. It looks not a lot of water, but whoa, that grower had a third sense and they could tell that it's going to get nasty hot. Now, what we've got is a huge heat accumulation here on the 21st. And what's even scarier about it is we've almost hit the risk threshold of 91. It's 100. We'll turn it to the risk threshold. And that goes back up to getting us almost all the pluses we need. But it must be that on the 21st, it gets really cold. And it's going between 59 and 63. It really needs 65 or 64 degrees to really trigger that threshold. So that's why it's got a high number and drop back down to orange. But we got something coming up here. It's heating up there. It's well over threshold. Here we're well over the 100-point threshold. But what we don't have is any moisture. And this is the part where you're asking, like, well, hold on. I want you to go out to your orchard and kick your shoes around and see if they come back wet from the grass. If they do, you actually have dew. And this would make it more of a threatening and scary environment. So this is the place where you need to go out and check the actual flower condition, because right now the weather station might not accurately tell you that there's dew out there. Weather sensors the moisture sensors is very hard to predict. And I think, you know what? It could change. Pop up thunderstorm, a temperature differential, and the next thing you know, you have dew, and you get wiped out by the fire blight. So there's not an easy answer. But in this case, it would be pertinent to go out and stick your hand in the most acceptable tree and see if anything has got any moisture in it. And that is our final example. And we're 1 minute to when you guys all want to leave. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the share up, but I'll answer any questions until you want to leave.
Yeah, feel free to throw questions in the Q&A. We'll get a couple minutes here.
Yeah. That was so well done. No, it probably takes forever to type the questions. I would be sitting there struggling, make a bunch of mistakes, and then feel anxious, and then try to fix them. Good. This is sounding great. Now everyone's a pro at the fire blight model. I love pros at fire blight model. They'll never have another question again. Now Leslie sees the type of question she's going to get emails and calls about.
Yeah, you might put me out of business, Kerik.
No, we don't want to do that. But maybe you won't get a call on a Saturday. They're just so well trained. All right, good. Yeah.
Cool.
And if weird questions come up in the middle of the season, just send an email to Leslie. She can get in touch with me, and
Absolutely.
we can look at specific situations. Leslie did mention I have all the appointments now, and extension, fortunately, is one of my hobbies. So I've decided to continue doing extension as a hobby, and so I'm always really interested in these type of things. Even it's always going to be Easter Sunday when the fire blight strikes, and I don't know, I got not that much going on. I can answer the Easter Sunday question. I've done it for Vermont. It's all good.
Well, if folks don't have questions, I'm going to throw my email into the chat,
Good.
and feel free to send me any follow-up questions if you think of one right when we log off. I know that always happens, so feel free to pass them to me, and I can pass it along to Leslie and Kerik as well.
Yeah, that sounds great. And we'll see Kerik next month for the next
All
webinar.
right, yeah, and we'll
So,
talk about specific products
very
and how they
exciting.
work. All right, super.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kerik. This was awesome. I know I
Yeah.
learned a lot, and hope you all
Good.
did too. And
Yep.
we'll be back on March 13th for
Play
organic
around with your own orchards, and if you
management.
find a weird discrepancy, let us know. All right.
Awesome. Thanks so much,
I'll see
Kerik.
ya.
Thanks,
All
Josie.
righty.
All right, take care.
Bye.